Okay, this is game 2. Matticus versus Ryan. So let's have a look. We've got Ryan here in the bottom left of Zen, and Matticus up in the top right. Zen is not a map that we've seen much of in the tournament, and I quite like it. I quite like this sort of reasonably open third. It's not an absolute gift to defend if that is the location you choose for your third. Some players opt for this location, move their army forward into this general area so they can come across to defend, or they can come back up here to defend the natural. I'm not sure about that. I think I prefer to have my army here and defend this. You can mine this little mineral patch, or you can leave it as it is. So if you do build your natural here, you can build a wall across here, a temporary wall, and then once that's mined out, that wall sort of disappears. So it's interesting. You've also got, of course, these mineral patches here that mean that you can't just push into your opponent's base off this ramp. So I like it. It's an interesting map. It's got a few twists, it's got a few turns. In general, if you did want to push up here, it would be very difficult to do so. If you had in mind a really fast rush, what you would do is send a couple of workers to actually mine this out early on, before your opponent's established a defensive position here. You know, so if, for example, you rallied 2 workers across the map mining this now, it takes the 2 workers 2 runs to clear one of these mineral patches. So looks like Matticus going for the quick expand, and I like it. That's what I was talking about previously. It's I'm not so sure about going straight into a reactor. In general, if you're doing that fast expand, it's a pretty good idea to get some sort of unit out, maybe a Reaper or whatever. You know, because if a Reaper turns up here, it's going to kill this SCV pretty sharpish. It's going to have come in and be really annoying, and you don't have any units to do anything about it. So you'll have spent the money for a fast expand, but you won't have the fast expand because the Reaper will be preventing you from finishing the building. As it happens, Ryan is not building a Reaper. He isn't about to go across the map. It is Marauders that he's churning out. We can see Combat Shield is upgrading. Now, if you're going for a Marauder push, Combat Shield, you know, I do hark on a lot about Combat Shield and what an important upgrade it is, but bear in mind it only affects your Marines. Marauders are armoured units already. So what is useful from the Tech Lab is Concussive Shell if you are going to go for that Marauder push. And I quite like a Marauder push. Marauders are meaty units, they're hefty, they can deal out an awful lot of damage. So there's definitely potential to push across the map with a bunch of Marauders and really put some hurt on your opponent. But we'll see if that's what he's got in mind. So mining away here, double gas being mined sort of suggests to me, you know, you don't really need 6 in gas just to build Marauders from 1 barracks, but there is another Marauder queued up. So I'm curious about what that double gas is for. As you can see, Ryan's gas is sort of accumulating here. As is, it's got to be said, Matticus again with the double fully saturated gas, and he hasn't spent any gas whatsoever yet. No upgrades, I don't believe, have come out just yet. So yeah, it's always, you know, sometimes people are guilty of just by default, just, you know, you expand, you get your gas down and you mine it, and it is generally worth having to think about it. If you're not in a position to spend it, do you need that gas income? Would these 6 SCVs be better off down here mining from these mineral patches and boosting your mineral income so that you can build production structures, so that you can get more racks out, so that you can get more Marines out, whatever. But anyway, you know, these are finer points, to be honest, but this is quarter-final stage, so we are beginning to consider the finer points. Following on from the quick expo then, Matticus goes for a quick third, and I don't mind seeing this at all. You know, from what he's seen of his opponent, a very early push isn't too likely. He has dropped a scan on the base, so has got some knowledge of what's here, and from what he's seen, he's reasonably comfortable that there's nothing about to appear in his face. Ryan's natural just finishing up, so, you know, in terms of income, the difference isn't overwhelming at present. Ryan doing a good job getting these mules dropped for extra income, but you know, as this starts to saturate and as this starts to mine as well, there is potential here for Matticus to really run away with a really hefty mineral advantage. But bear in mind, if you do a very economical opening like this, you're going to have a lot of income. You need to be able to spend it. Otherwise, what use has it done you? So, you know, alongside this, you need to be dropping more barracks. You need lots more barracks because you're going to end up with so many minerals. And how are you going to spend those? You know, you can run these 2 barracks off this one base. Yeah, I'd really like to see more production facilities coming down for Matticus. I'd like to see him not just drop 1 more barracks, I'd like to see him drop 3 more, you know, sort of go up to 5 barracks, 2 factories, 2 starports, something like that. Ryan, meanwhile, a bit of a pause in unit production. The only thing building here is this Ghost, and it looks like cloaking coming in for the Ghost. So perhaps we're going to see an attempt at a nuke drop, and I would love that. The factory's finished up. It has got the tech lab, so there is potential to build siege tanks, but we don't see any in production just yet. Hopefully that will change shortly. You know, the siege tank is such a great defensive unit. It can just make a huge difference. A siege tank somewhere about here means nothing's going to come up this ramp and bother you. Positioned here, anything that wants to attack your men is getting hit by those siege tank shells and having a bad time. Possibly even further forward, possibly somewhere about here, so that you've got coverage of this ramp, you've got coverage, partial coverage of this ramp, and anything coming through this gap is going to get a pissed in as well. Yeah, just all around fantastic in defense, absolutely fantastic. Slightly supply blocked, and is about to remedy that. So in the production tab, you can see +1 just finishing up, stim finishing up. Don't forget, if you know, stim is great, but you've got to have medevacs. Now these guys are going to be yeah, here they come. They're going to filter through this choke, and you know, this is where if you've got that siege tank in position, these just die. Ryan needs to react to this. He needs to respond straight away. He needs to get moving. It's 52 army supply against a lesser army. You don't want to fight in this choke. You need to pull back, come out of the choke. Oh my goodness, this could be a quick game. This Ghost has got cloak. I think the other one had cloak but didn't use it. The siege tank could save the day here, but it's very far forward, so these units will be able to snipe it down. A little bit further back from the edge is what you need, so that the units on the low ground can't just pick it off. The Ghost never did cloak. I think this might just be GG. So this is disappointing. So yeah, what have we learned? What have we learned? The key thing here is when you expand, move your units into position. So, you know, it's all well and good to defend your front door, but don't forget that once you've expanded, your front door has moved. So you need to move your units, get your supply depot here, block this off or whatever if you need to. But to be honest, if there's a siege tank here, a siege tank here, you don't even need to. Anything that tries to attack you has to do, you know, it just has to take an absolute beating to come up through a ramp. The other thing we've learned is never fight in a choke. You just don't. You don't fight in a choke. The way to deal with choke points is to move your units rather than attack. Move your units through the choke and then attack. Alternatively, pull back and force your opponent to have to come through the choke. Fighting in a ramp like that is it's a horrible thing. If I just go back a couple, I'll show you why it's so vile. You know, ultimately what happens is your front units stop to shoot, which means the units behind that cannot shoot because they're out of range. So your first units will stop to open fire at the limit of their range. So you're in a choke here. You've only got maybe 3 units actually shooting. Your opponent is spread out across this whole area and has all of its units shooting. So your stuff ends up in this bottleneck and it is mostly not shooting. So here we have, look how many units are shooting for Matticus compared to it's just, you know, 2 Marines and a Marauder at any given time for Ryan. So these guys are getting a bad time. The other problem you've got is if there is something like a siege tank, the splash damage it does, all your units in this funnel are forced really close to each other. So splash damage obviously has a finite radius. It means it's just smashing absolutely everything. The splash from a siege tank will affect every single unit that is on that ramp. So yeah, so that's why you just don't do it. It pretty much never goes well. So yeah, as I mentioned before, the way to do it is move through the choke and then fight, or if that isn't possible, run from the choke and force your opponent to come to you. Okay, other thing we learned is, high ground siege tanks are fantastic. Don't put them too close to the edge. You don't want your opponent to be able to snipe them from the low ground. You want to force them to come up this ramp if they want to pick off that siege tank. Anyway, the GG was called, and it is in fact 2-0 to Matticus. I will presently get on with game 3.